The Associated Press has a deep well of photos chronicling historic moments. Their archives also contain everyday snapshots from the past. We picked out 10 evocative photos from their collection that you probably haven't come across before. A steelworker rests on the 86th floor of the new Empire State Building during construction in New York City, September 24, 1930. The Chrysler Building can be seen in background. A line of women rally for women's suffrage and advertise a free rally discussing women's right to vote in Washington, D.C. on October 3, 1915. The 19th Amendment was ratified on August 18, 1920. Queen Elizabeth II celebrates her 13th birthday on April 21, 1939. Her birthday presents included a diamond bracelet from the king and clothes, among which were silk stockings from the Queen Mother. French women, exiled from their native Paris, celebrate Bastille Day in a London park, July 14, 1942. They're dressed in their national costumes. Dorothy Counts, 15, the first black student to attend Harding High School in Charlotte, North Carolina, is taunted by white students on September 5, 1957. Dr. Edwin Tompkins, a family friend, escorted her. A tearful Beatle lover pleads unsuccessfully with a policeman to carry her fan button to Ringo at a Beatles concert on September 4, 1964. More than 30,000 spectators attended 2 Indiana State Fair shows in Indianapolis. Mr. and Mrs. Paul Rurik from Bavaria, Germany, look out from the stern of a boat carrying refugees in New York Harbor on October 28, 1956. The Statue of Liberty is in the background. A crowd rings in the new year on January 1, 1938, at Broadway and 7th Avenue. The old New York Times building is in the background. A drill instructor administers his brand of shock treatment to a new Marine recruit on October 20, 1971. At a Marines training camp in Parris Island, South Carolina. Pope Paul VI looks over St. Peter's Square, which is filled with nearly 500,000 people listening to his Easter message on Easter Sunday, April 10, 1966. People came from all over the world to hear his speech. Canadian photographer Harry Pollard is best known for his portraits of First Nations people, a historically oppressed and overlooked demographic. This image comes from a series Pollard took in 1910 across Alberta, Canada that featured people from the Tsuut'ina, Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani nations, among others. The above portrait is of Wolf Collar from the Siksika nation. Wolf Collar's portrait is a good example of the effects of colonialism and the fight to preserve one's culture. Wolf Collar wears traditional braids and jewelry, but their coat resembles those worn by European Canadians. In general, Canada's treatment of First Nations peoples has been described as cultural genocide. The government forced many Indigenous populations to assimilate to European practices while taking their land. Pollard's portraits are a key part of marking that history and displaying the resilience of First Nations peoples. A controversial figure with an embroiled history of power and dictatorship, Stalin is not someone often displayed as scared or dismayed. This unauthorized image shows him in a defeated position as he discovers the Germans took Kiev, a part of the USSR. The Nazis used an encirclement technique to successfully capture the city, killing about 600,000 people in the process. This battle took many of the resources from the USSR's Red Army, and they were unable to ever fully recover. This image is one example of several in which Chinese Americans make it clear that they are not of Japanese descent. The woman in the photo is Ruth Lee, sunbathing in Florida and displaying what is now the flag of Taiwan. After the Japanese bombing of Pearl Harbor during World War II, the U.S. government sent Japanese Americans to internment camps. This, paired with the already existing anti-Japanese sentiment as a result of the war, made being Asian in America dangerous. Many people grouped all East Asians together, spewing racial slurs and attacking them. As a result, some Chinese Americans used Chinese flags to display their heritage and avoid ridicule. Many Chinese publications also picked up anti-Japanese sentiment. After the armistice that ended the Korean War and effectively created two Koreas, about 21 American prisoners of war refused to return home. A fraction of this group is pictured above. The reasons for their obstinacy vary depending on who explains it. The American narrative at the time was that they were brainwashed. Some of the black soldiers who remained said it was because their captors helped them realize the innate racism present in their home country. Many informed on their fellow soldiers as well as participated in anti-American propaganda, both of which are considered treason. Labeled the turncoats, many of these men spent a few years in China before trickling back home. Only 3 people ended up keeping their promise to never go back. Serra Pelada was the world's largest open-air gold mine. Located in Brazil, it devastated both its workers and the local environment. This aerial view photograph shows the miners climbing in dangerous conditions to perform their work. It is one in a series from photographer Sebastião Salgado, who immortalized the mine in the 1980s. Workers risked their lives in this mine for the chance of becoming rich. The mine also cut into large portions of the Amazon rainforest, harming the natural ecosystem. Fidel Castro's antagonistic role in American history makes this image both rare and surprising. Shortly after taking power in Cuba, Castro went on a 2-week diplomatic tour of America, meeting with Vice President Nixon and visiting the historic sites. In this image, he leaves a wreath at the Lincoln Memorial. After his tour, relations between the U.S. and Cuba grew strained as America imposed trade restrictions and the Cuban Missile Crisis almost caused a Third World War. Little footage remains of Australia's last surviving Tasmanian tigers, which were believed to have gone extinct in 1936. In ancient times, Tasmanian tigers, also known as thylacines, roamed around much of Australia. By the 20th century, they could only be found in Tasmania. Growing human populations destroyed their natural habitats, gave them new diseases, and hunted them. The Tasmanian tiger, pictured here, is from the Hobart Zoo.